Good evening, members.
Hi.
Good
Evening, everybody. And welcome to the West Northamptonshire Shadow Overview and Scrutiny Committee, March the 2nd. We have a number of people with us this evening to talk to our agenda. Director of Transformation, Jane Carr, Leader of the Council, Councillor Ian McCord, George Candler, Chief Executive of Northampton Borough Council, and we have Andrew Hankin, Monitoring Officer. So welcome everybody, and somebody's dog as well. So welcome everybody, and Democratic Services here, of course, to support us. So on with the agenda. Do we have any apologies, please, Tracy?
Yes, Councillor Penny Flavel.
Thank you very much. Anybody else know of any apologies? No? I can't see any. Right. Notifications, request to address the meeting.
We don't have any, Chair.
Right. Declarations of members' interests. No, I can't see anybody coming forward to that. Right, Chair's announcements. I do have one thing I'd like to bring up before you. I've been contacted by a member just to pass comment on last Monday's meeting, where we had a very, very long agenda, and perhaps there were some concerns about the amount of material that the full council was expected to cover in one evening, and maybe people wanted to make some comments about how we can move forward in future to avoid some of the rather lengthy, protracted discussions that were held and the length of the agenda. So if anybody has any comments about that, maybe we could just start with that briefly under Chair's announcements.
Councillor Davenport is indicating, Chair.
Julie Davenport, Councillor Davenport, would you like to come in there?
I keep getting muted. I remember in the past that when we had the budget was the bulk of a meeting, and that we would discuss it on meetings. So I was quite surprised that we had that +2 motions.
Right,
and yeah,
okay.
Definitely. If we're going to have the budget, it should be separate.
Okay, thank you, thank you. We want to just go through quickly any more comments on this.
We have Councillor Emma Roberts and Councillor Alan Walker.
Yes. Emma Roberts, like to put forward some constructive comments on this?
Yeah. Firstly, I'd like to agree with Councillor Davenport. I would have expected just a budget to be an item on its own, particularly when it had a number of issues to consider. There were 6 other items on the agenda, all of which needed consideration. I wanted to touch really briefly on conduct as well, because I'm not sure that the conduct at the meeting was as I would really have liked it to have been. And in particular around when somebody had something to say, if somebody disagrees with somebody, that's fine, that's okay, but we should do that in a constructive and reasonable manner. And to get through a meeting, we shouldn't cut short what somebody is saying. So if somebody's got something very valid to say, again, whether a person agrees with that or not, that doesn't matter, we're going to disagree, but a person should be given the right and the time to speak freely without interruption, I think is fair to say.
Right, thanks. Councillor Alan Walker, like to come in briefly on this?
Yeah, just briefly. One, the length of the agenda was far too long. Secondly, it went from a budget meeting into a meeting of all sorts. Most meetings that, and I will say it, the county council has, as far as the budget is concerned, is a business meeting. So you deal with business. You don't deal with any outside things like petitions to the MPs and God knows what else.
Right.
The third thing I'd like to say is that equally, you as the chairman have the right to turn around and stop anybody prattling on, because that was a lot of the problem the other night, was people were prattling on about all sorts of different things. Thirdly, again, as chairman, you was allowing people to come in 2 or 3 times. And to be quite blunt about it, the rules of debate and chairmanship is one person gets the right to debate it for 3 minutes if it's 3 minutes, and he sticks to that 3 minutes. They don't get a right to come in again. The only people that get a right is the petitioner or the motion and the person who's supporting that. And
Okay.
I'm going to say no more about that because, as I say, at the end of the day, it's about people understanding what the Constitution is, what can be done, and not abusing it.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Ken Pritchard, and then Ken Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Roberts with, I should say, so I thought some of the members' behaviour was really unacceptable. Because obviously that particularly that we're actually broadcasting on YouTube, I don't think it gives our residents a particularly good impression, the way that we conduct business. Also, I would like to bring to the attention with regards to the amount of times having a roll call vote. I think that was inappropriate. It's something which, you know, electronic voting is something which is the norm over most IT scenarios. And it does get recorded. And if anybody any resident or any member wants to know how a councillor voted, it actually can be interrogated on the database.
Thank you, Ken. Councillor Ritchie, Ken Ritchie. Thanks. Ken, you need to unmute. Ken, we can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, beg your pardon. Councillor Walker referred to people prattling on, and I've no doubt that people did prattle on, but somebody's view of what prattling on is might be somebody else's words of wisdom. And I think we've got to be slightly careful about, you know, being rather derogatory about some of the things that some people might want to say. You know, if there are issues that are for people that are important, look, they have got to be given the opportunity to say it. And it takes me to wondering whether we have actually scheduled in the correct number of full council meetings for the year. The fewer there are, the more has got to be left in the hands of the executive. And I just feel that if we really want to have a proper vibrant council, we've got to make sure that there are a sufficient number of meetings. And with a large council, meetings are going to take longer because there are more people that will want to have a say. And I just think that we need to make sure that we have, you know, we allow ourselves enough council time to allow democracy to work properly. Hopefully when we can, well, perhaps we don't hope that we get back to having meetings in which we all sit down together. But I see that in that stage, it is quite necessary. I think on some things, a roll call vote is necessary. If we had a system, as I have seen operating with some other organizations, where the screen would show how individuals had voted, I would be quite content with that. But part of our transparency has got to be that people can actually watch this voting and see how their individual councillors cast their votes. And that's why I think that is quite important. I'm not at all happy about the, you know, the click a box sort of voting, where we can't see, you know, without making special inquiries. We don't know who voted one way and who voted another way.
Okay, thank you, Ken. And lastly, Dennis Meredith, Councillor Meredith. Just briefly.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief, yeah. In my opinion, I think a lot of people speak for the sake of speaking. I think a lot of councillors, when they got something to say, they just will speak because they think it's the right thing to do. I think you should only really speak if you've really got something important to say or to do with emotion or anything like that. But it has been drawn to me that just recently some people speak when there's no need to them to speak, and people are crossing over saying what other people have said before. But I think the other thing is, I think the chair has got to be perhaps a bit more stricter. And just,
I think we've got to be careful about making comments about individual behaviour here.
Yeah, well, all I'm saying is I just think some councillors, speak when there's no need for them to speak. That's all. I'm not saying who's at fault or who's not at fault.
No.
I'm just saying it comes clear to me that is what's happening. That is what makes a meeting so long.
And I think training comes into that, doesn't it? A lot of new councillors will be starting in May, and training is very, very important. Councillor McCord, welcome, and you'd like to add your comments.
Well, thank you, Chair. I think there'll be a wide range of views on Tuesday's meeting. I do think certainly a key takeaway would be that the agenda was slightly ambitious, if not heroic. I actually listened into the Northants the following night. Sorry, it was on the Thursday night, not the following night. And they finished at around 1:15 midnight, give or take 5 minutes. So they did actually go on and finish it off. But again, it had a similar agenda with similar points on it. So the ones that we deferred to next week, they cracked through and got things sorted. All I would say to members is, before we meet next week, please do read the proposed constitution for West Northants Council and satisfy yourselves that the provisions in that constitution will allow the meetings of the council to carry on, and they are different to what was on the shadow authority constitution. One obvious difference is that the West Northants Council meetings going forward, the one we're being asked to look at next week, does have time limits in it. There were no time limits in the one for Tuesday night past, and what we'll actually be talking on Thursday as well. So that doesn't have time limits. There is a specific budget meeting and a budget agenda proposed in the West Northants Council meeting. I firmly believe that the budget should be an item in itself. I also think that should extend to where we're going on amendments and things to the budget, that members need to be given ample opportunity to scrutinise, particularly budget amendments, that you can check that the maths work, you can check that the amendment as proposed makes sense. And to some extent, the safest thing then for any administration to do is not to accept any amendments if they're coming so late that they haven't had any opportunity to be scrutinised in any way. So I think there's a couple of things changing there. As for speakers, and I appreciate there's always that opportunity that people will want to speak. I don't think we can stop people from speaking, although I do think we need to ensure ourselves as a council and a group of members that we have necessary balance struck between getting the business of the council sorted and through, allowing enough speakers to speak without sitting there to midnight. So we need to look at start times, finish times, length of meetings, length of times on individual items. And I would ask everyone to read it and satisfy yourselves that you're happy with all of those things just before you stick your hand up next Thursday and say, yeah, we'll live with that constitution.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think it's been a variety of views expressed, and I think one of the major items that we've looked at as an overview and scrutiny group has been the constitution. So I value your comments, and I think that they will be a useful way forward if they take forward. I'd just like to bring Andrew Hunkin, the monitoring officer, in for a moment, because Andrew, you've been very much involved with the governance work that we've done here. So I think your comments here would be really useful just to sort of round this section off.
Thank you. Just to point out, but I'm not the monitoring officer, but I tend to come along in that place just to make sure that there is a legal and democratic services presence available.
You are our monitoring officer for this evening.
I think Councillor McCord summed it up very well. Looking forward, you have got a constitution which does have a budget meeting in it, and that's exclusively is what it will be for. The rules of debate around that are very clear as well, so I think that will help. And as Councillor McCord said as well, there are also time limits in there. And I think you found yourself in a unique position last week, in that the Shadow Constitution doesn't set out for a budget meeting. You've got a deadline of the 31st of March, which everybody knew you've got to get your budget and your constitution in place. So again, as Councillor McCord said, perhaps it was a bit ambitious, or I think you used the word heroic, to actually try and do it, but it was hoped that we would get it through. As it happens, we were able to adjourn the meeting and fix another date. So hopefully we'll still have everything in place by the 31st of March, and also we can learn from that experience as well to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And I'm sure those lessons will have been taken on board.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Right, let's move on with the agenda. I think it's useful to make those comments. This has been a huge part of our work as well, going through the meetings. Right, on to the minutes, and I hope you've had a chance to read through the minutes. And can I ask that if there is nothing in here that you disagree with in terms of accuracy, that we agree them? Can I ask for agreement on the minutes?
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Councillor Lane, is that you as well?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. Well, on to item number 6, the transformation programme. And a very warm welcome to Jane Carr. I'll find you on my screen. This is a nightmare, isn't it? Finding the right person, who's the Director of Transformation for the West Northampton Unitary Authority. And Jane is going to lead us through transformation programme, explain it. It's been one of those items, I think, on overview and scrutiny that we have been slightly mystified by. And clearly it's a very important element of the new authority. And we look forward to you telling us all about it, really, and answering some of the questions that I think you have had forwarded to you this evening. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for inviting me along. So I've got a few slides. I'm just going to run you through a bit of a presentation, and then if that leaves you with unanswered questions, then obviously we can go through the questions that you've asked me or sent me previously to make sure we've got everything answered. Hopefully I'll be able to demystify it a bit for you. Could you move to the next slide, please, Tracy, if you're in control of those? Okay, so just to give you a bit of a background in terms of transformation, because it's been used to describe many things, and I think we need to be clear on which bit we're describing, which will help, obviously, with your understanding. So the first thing we've got is the Future Northants programme, which is basically the programme that is delivering the local government reform, and the new unitary programme, which you're aware of. So during that programme, there was a year extension, which you will be aware of. And the idea originally of that year extension was that we had an extra year where we could do some transformation, and there should have been a transformation focus. However, what wasn't accounted for at that point was that COVID-19 was going to come along and knock us off the rails. So when COVID-19 appeared, it meant that large elements of the resource, both in the FN programme and business as usual services, had to be diverted to COVID response. And that meant that the programme had to be redefined into Safe and Legal and Safe and Legal Plus. So the transformation element that should have happened in the last year didn't take place. Now, as we've got through the COVID pandemic, obviously more and more lockdowns have taken place. There's been lots of rounds of things like the business grants, community response, large vaccination programs that have had to be dealt with. So lots of resource has been moved to those programs to ensure that they're met. So by the time we got to December, we're at a point where, in fact, most of the plus stuff had to be put to one side, and we had to concentrate on delivering Safe and Legal for day one. So where we are at the moment is we have a list of critical deliverables in the programme, which means that we have to deliver those to enable us to function on day one. We are on track with all of those. Obviously, that's not part of the transformation programme, but I'm just giving you the background to make sure that you understand where we're at. We're also delivering day one response, which means that there will be a function in place on day one to respond to any issues that either members or staff have. Public will be dealt with through the normal customer service routes, and we are also looking at programme stabilisation. As we know, some of these elements will move over to day two and will go into business as usual, but we need a transition period of that. So the current transformation that's taking place is actually within business as usual. So you've got the Adults Transformation Programme, which is the target operating model that they've been working on with Newton Europe, which I think I'm sure you've seen some stuff on previously, but that's the Adults Programme. There's also the Business Rate Pilots projects, a number of which are children's, adults, and some infrastructure ones such as contract review. And then there are a number of NCC transformation projects which are in the business as usual areas. So things like home to school transport, etc., sit in that pool. So at the moment, they all sit outside of the current LGR programme or Future North Lancs programme. Could you, next slide please, Tracy? So the actual transformation journey so far into the new world, the Transformation Task and Finish Group, which contained a number of members, was started back in June 2020. And there was initial scoping of ambition work. So alongside the vision and values work that was going on, the members looked at what was the kind of long-term programme of transformation that they wanted to look at. So things like community hubs, what was the growth element? When I came in end of October to take over from the programme from Paul Helsby and start some of the transformation work with members, we then had to relook at what that would be, and I'll talk you through that in the next slide where we're actually going with the transformation. But the first thing we had to do with the group and with the members is to set some principles by which we were going to measure and decide on what transformation projects really should be going forward. So the principles came from two places: a session with the executive around principles, general principles for the unitary in terms of corporate programme, and a session with the members of the Task and Finish group where we reviewed what the key elements are that members felt were hugely important when we were looking at when we changed or improved any of the work that we were doing with services, when we were looking at quality, when we were looking at customer journeys. So you can see there the 8 elements that members felt were the most important to them and that they wanted to set as the principles. And this report has been taken into executive as well, so that shadow executive have seen this report with the principles in as well and have noted those and are happy with the principles as they stand. So they also ordered them. Although what they didn't want to do is, for example, something like accessible and inclusive, members didn't want that not to be taken into account when we were looking at customer resident centred. So some of these are cross-cutting. So customer resident centred, they felt was the absolute core of what we should be as the unitary, and any transformation programmes should be around that customer centred focus, so that we're not doing things just for the sake of it or just to make savings. We're doing things that really put the resident at the heart. And then the second part of that was to provide best value or value for money. So that's not about cutting services or taking money away. That's about making sure we make the most of our resources when we're looking at programmes, and that we're not wasting public money, and that we are investing it in the best ways to serve the need of our residents. Focus on sustainability was a really important one, and you'll note there the environmental element the members wanted first, because the green and the climate change agenda is very, very important to people, along with the social and economic, given that we're going to need to go into recovery phase. And prevention and early intervention focused, members felt that at some points in some of the places we've done in the sovereign councils, we'd perhaps come away from that, and it had led to higher demand on services. And then partnership and collaboration was key. Improves quality of services really is an important one. Accessible and inclusive. And then technology, there was a large debate over technology, but what was felt by members is that it was important that it was the right technology at the right time, not just technology for the sake of it. So things that made life easier for our residents and using the pathway, but still to keep that face-to-face element where people really need it and where people actually want that. So those principles were set, and what we've been using those for then is setting the timeline. So I haven't shared the timeline with you at the moment, because at the moment it's in draft form, and what it hasn't done is it hasn't been through the executive leadership team yet. So unfortunately, I can't give you the detail of that. It does exist and it is in place. It just needs to be signed off by the executive leadership team, and then it has to go back to the Task and Finish group. So we've set the timeline, which is going to contain the first 2 to 3 years, and I'll talk you through those in the next slide. And we have also now got to negotiate with the North over certain services. Tracy, if you could move on to the next slide, please. So the there has to be a focus for the initial 2 to 3 years because we have an awful lot of work to do over the next 2 to 3 years. So there's huge pressure on transformation. So we need to finalise existing transformation that sits in NCC. Some of it will stay in business as usual, but some big projects will pass the transformation team to finalise those and deliver those. We also need to finish all of the business rate pilots project that started last year. And we need to make sure that those come to fruition, that savings are materialised in the future years, which is where they are accounted for. We also have a large number of hosted services. So these were the services where it wasn't possible of NCC to disaggregate in time, or it would have meant that there was detrimental effect or impact on those services. So those hosted services still need to be separated and disaggregated. And this is where in the timeline we still have to make agreement with the North, because wherever those are being disaggregated, there is a receiving council, either West or North. So that has to go hand in hand, and whichever council is hosting has to have the other council ready to receive and do the other work on the other side. Then there's aggregation, which is the bringing together of services. So that will count for district and borough services, but also central services such as some of the corporate services like finance, HR, IT. All of those will need aggregating because they are operating as separate services currently, and they'll need to come together to ensure we can deliver those services properly. We're looking at early transformation possibilities. So effectively they're your quick wins, things like contract review, property, where we can look at using property more effectively. And the final one is opportunities. There is a massive opportunities that have been highlighted by some of the subject matter experts within the Future Northants programme as we've gone through. So all of those need now putting into the transformation timeline and a decision on assessment on which ones of those we prioritise, and using those principles that have been set by members to do that. Okay, Tracy, you can go to the next slide. So the next step, so just to be clear, there is no transformation team in place currently. The only teams that we have are the business as usual teams that are in services working on transformation, such as adults, or the programme team who are working directly and only on the Future Northants programme. The transformation team is a restructure of the programme team, and they will not be in place until the 1st of April. So the work will have to start from the 1st of April. So that team is being recruited to currently. Consultation has happened with the programme team, and the interviews will be running through, ready to have everybody in place by April the 1st. There will still be some vacancies in that team where we can't recruit or where we haven't got enough people, but the bulk of the team will be in place then. There is 37 members of those in the West. So that team is designed to flex, so we can add fixed term resource to it if we have larger projects. And then we can also obviously review that if we need to. So our next job is to finalise the timeline, get agreement from executive leadership team, agreement from members, and then take that through the governance process. And then that will need to be worked up into a more substantial timeline with obviously service or delivery plans underneath. So that will be a more complicated and detailed plan. Once that timeline's finalised, there's no reason why, if you so wish, I can't bring that back to overview and scrutiny for you to take a look at from there. So I'll leave that with you to decide if you want that to happen. We also need to set out the strategy. So using the principles and the priorities that are set in the timeline, we need to set out the strategy for delivering that. So they will be used as the basis, and then there will be elements throughout that will sit inside the corporate plan and add to the corporate plan and set out to deliver any principles or priorities that are laid out in the corporate plan as well. We also need to put in place a framework and assurance. One of the learnings from the current programme is that we don't have a necessarily fit for purpose system to record all of the projects. So a lot of the work has had to be done on manual spreadsheets, which of this size programme is not the best way to do it. And what we want going forward is really strong management information and assurance and quality checks to make sure that we are delivering that benefits that are realised and not double counted, which is hugely important, and that every piece of transformation work that we do has a robust business case underneath it to make sure that we are really doing things for the right reasons. And again, those principles sit behind that. And the team is basically broken into 3 elements: design and delivery and the quality and assurance. Design and delivery, so the next steps will be to design the programs down to the detailed level with the services, and that is where the services will be taken through that process. They'll be facilitated by the team to make sure that everything and those principles run right the way through the services. So when we're doing any design work, those principles will be at the forefront, and we will make sure that all design work contains those and that services are focused on those when they are building any new redesign, any new pathways, any customer change at all. And then the delivery element is, once those are designed, then they will go into the delivery element to make sure that we follow them right the way through and realise benefits. And that will keep being recorded even after a programme is finished, to make sure those benefits are recorded. So I'm going to stop there, Chair, because I know there was a number of questions. I don't know how you want to do the next stage, as to whether there's any other questions from that, or whether you just want to ask me. I can answer anything you want.
Let's see if anybody wants to come forward with some questions. Right. David Smith, Councillor Smith, I think your hand is up first. If you'd like to come in there.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Jane. So the size of the team, is it 37 or is it 52? Sorry, because you just said 37.
Yeah, it's 37. I'm not sure where 52 came from that was in the questions.
Okay, that came from a previous meeting that you attended, and you gave us the number.
Right, okay, sorry. So after the consultation, so a number of changes happened during the consultation. So the final number is 37. It probably would have been 52 originally when we started it, but actually it's been assessed against the work that needs to be done, and the number is 37 following the consultation.
So following on from that then, in a previous meeting, you gave us a cost of the team at 2.9 million.
Yeah.
And what is the cost?
So the budget is still 2.9 million. The cost of the current team at 37 is around 2.1. But what we will be looking to do is flex that. So what we're not saying is that there won't be other projects, because we haven't actually costed out the opportunities from the programme, from the FM programme. So there is flexibility in the budget to bring in additional resource on fixed term or consultancy, because sometimes you need specialist skills. So for example, if something's specifically an ICT project, we might need a specialist architect, or we might need specialist skills. So it's designed to flex in that way.
Okay, that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Is that finished, David?
It's finished for now. My little brain will work through it. I'm sure I'll come up with something else. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Ken Pritchard and then Emma Roberts, please.
Thank you, Chair. Jane, with regards to the transformation team, does it have responsibility for analysing what the cost savings are of the integration, or should we say the rationalisation of all the existing legacy councils? Would that be part of your responsibility?
So in terms of responsibility, it's a joint responsibility. The transformation team will have the target to deliver the savings across the budget through transformation. But in addition, it's also sitting with the ADs and the directors to make sure that it runs through the organisation, because what we don't want is everybody not feeling responsible, transformation being seen as something that sits to the side. So will have in any benefits realisation, any business case, a responsibility to ensure those benefits are realised. But in addition, the directors and ADs will also have that responsibility to make sure that those savings in their areas are realised too.
And also, with regards to transformation, one of my concerns actually is there's no end to it, which I find quite strange, because transformation, you must have a start and an end, but it doesn't seem to be an end.
No, and so the expectation would be, so there will be projects and programmes with starts and ends. Anybody who's been in local government a long while will know that things do tend to change a lot of the time, and transformation happens a lot of the time. What we'd expect is the size of transformation in scale terms is smaller and larger. We know that for the next 2 to 3 years, we've got a massive programme. We would then expect to be moving into kind of real modelling and growth agenda and lots of other things. And we also know from previous elements where councils have either joined together or separated, that actually it can take up to 10 years for that to properly materialise. So it is considered to be long term. Whether it'll always be transformation or whether it will take another form in the future, I don't know. But certainly for the next, the foreseeable future, there will be transformation to deliver, and it'll be hugely important that we get it right and that it is entrenched in the organisation, because without that we don't deliver the change we need and we don't deliver the improvement to customers. And what we don't want to do is go back to previous areas where potentially you end up salami slicing services rather than properly remodelling and using resource in the best way.
That's a heck of a commitment when you think £3 million per annum open-ended. So that's my concern anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, thank you for that, Ken. Emma, and then Andre Gonzalez Establish.
Thank you, Chair. Thank
Emma
you, Jane.
Roberts.
Thank you. First question, similar to Ken's, on if we've got transformation, it has to be transformed. I can't see how I understand there will always be continual or new processes or adaptations that we'll make, but there's got to be an end goal. There's got to be a transformed state where we feel that we have made enough progress, enough changes, and we allow a time of stabilization. Because if you continually roll in transform all of the time, I'm not sure you're ever going to reach that stabilization and have anything to measure against. So that would be a real worry for me. I was also concerned about the timeline not coming to scrutiny before it goes anywhere else. When we had our very first meetings of this group, we said, what was one of the things that was really important to us? Well, that's pre-decision scrutiny. That's seeing things before they happen and before they're agreed. And it doesn't feel like we're doing that. A lot of these meetings feel like we're discussing something that's already been rubber stamped and signed off, and we have not as much opportunity to shape those and scrutinize those, in my opinion. So I'm disappointed that we're not seeing those timelines of transformation in here. Another question, sorry, is on Newton Europe and how much Newton Europe are actually doing and how involved they are. And in addition to the 2.9 million that the team's going to cost, how much is their involvement shaping this and how much is it costing? And that'll do me for now, I think, before Jane, you don't know what I've said. So thank you.
Right.
Okay, so starting at the beginning with the transformation question, absolutely there will be end goals, and I think the thing to say is that we are intending that transformation will be very internally focused initially, because we know we've got 2 to 3 years of the aggregation, disaggregation of hosted, etc. But there is also a large program that needs to happen with partners around health and social care integration, working across the system in terms of transformation. So I think whilst there will be ends to certain parts of it, it will adapt into the other part that we really need to play, which is to become better as a system with dealing with the same people. That isn't to say that it will never end. And I'm sure at some day, you know, my whole goal really is to work myself out of a job because I've done such a good job in transforming services that I'm not needed anymore. And, you know, if I get to that point, great, that's what it should be. But taking on board what you're saying, there is still a long way to go before we get to that point. Sorry. With regards to Newton Europe, because they are entrenched in adults, they're not entrenched in my program. Unfortunately, I don't have the information on Newton Europe. So if you wanted specific information, we can record that and I can ask Anna to come back with that. So they're involved in the adults transformation program, but not in the Future Northants program or the future transformation program either. And sorry, I'm so sorry, Emma, I've forgotten the middle question. There was a middle part to it.
It was around the timeline and not being able to scrutinise that timeline before it goes to the exec, task and finish groups, etc. Feels like we'd just be seeing something that's already been signed off. We can talk about it, but we can't do anything to shape it. That was my problem with that.
Right. I'll take that on board. The one thing I would say with the timeline is obviously it names services. So what I'm mindful of is ensuring that we get it far enough down the line and we don't unsettle staff by showing them something before we're ready to, but taking on board what you're saying. I will look at overview and scrutiny when we can bring it here to make sure that they're bearing that in mind.
Chair, if I could really quickly, just on that, I appreciate there'll need to be discretion and there'll need to be certain sensitivities, but there are ways in which we can be shown items to enable us to shape that move. And I would like to see the further information in respect to Newton Europe. If everybody's seen it and I've missed it, my apologies, but that would be helpful. Thank you.
I think that might be a question for Anna Earnshaw, mightn't it? Because I think she was very instrumental in setting up that contract.
It would be, Chair. I think Jane offered to take that back to Anna to take that away, which is why I referenced it again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Andre, and then Ken Ritchie, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Jane, and thanks ever so much for that helpful presentation. I have to say, you are clearly in charge of a department that has an awful lot of mystery, probably for good reason around it, I'm sure, but it is something that we've had a lot of debate about. Something I'm very keen to explore, Jane, is clearly you've been tasked with delivering transformation to the council, but quite clearly not all of it is council based effectively, because I'm sure there'll be plenty of partners such as health or protective services in other areas that will need to come on board to enable that transformation to happen. Can you give me an idea about how much of that is partnership transformation and how much of that really would be pure council services transformation? And will the public effectively take ownership, or will we take ownership as the council, obviously, of those services, or are they being transformed out of the council? That's one question. The other is, will the staff return to their substantive posts? Because clearly, if you're taking staff out, professionals, and put them into a transformational team, would they then go with the transformational project, effectively the completed project in those areas, or will they stay effectively outside their main roles, and are they then, as you say, possibly redundant, if you like, at the end of their tenure? And can you give me an idea, is it a fast task workforce, or so fast task force where you're going in, blitzing a problem, dealing with it, and then and addressing that effectively for the council and for the public, and then coming out? So it's a 6-week fix, if you like. And the last one, I'm sorry to burden you with plenty of questions, but it really is exciting, if you like, in terms of what we've got, and you have a lot to deliver. I do think that regular reporting to members is absolutely critical. And I do think that all of us have taken a tremendous interest in what you will be tasked with doing. And I'm sure that both scrutiny and the members wide would be very, very keen to have a regular input or regular update about the successful projects you're delivering.
Thank you. Right, a lot of questions there. Okay. Did you get them all, Jane?
Sorry, very passionate, very keen.
I think so. So the first one on just correct me if I go wrong, please, Councillor Gonzalez. I've just think I've got them. So are things being transformed out? The answer is we don't know what they're being transformed to at the moment. So we know the transformation has to take place. So with things like hosted, we know that services need to be disaggregated, but there's a staged and phased process to this. So for example, with disaggregation, services would just be disaggregated north and west for hosted services. With something like aggregation, there is an initial piece of work that needs to happen so the teams can work effectively. So if you took finance, for example, you've got half of a county team plus a number of district and borough teams. They need to be able to function on day one in a way that works, because they haven't got 4 different councils to account for anymore. However, what we couldn't do is a full restructure on day one, because actually you have to remodel the whole thing. So there is a phased approach to this. So those elements are definitely internal. They're the kind of internal workings of the council. How does that respond? And how do we work through that to make it workable and make the most of our resources and materialise the savings that we've talked about in aggregation terms within the budget? The second part is then remodeling so we get the best systems and pathways. And, you know, for me, the huge opportunity of Unitary is bringing district and borough services together. So when you look at things like adults and housing, how they work together, you know, you've got a lot of the same clients, you know, growth and regeneration, the planning parts of the county and the districts coming together. Huge opportunity, and the most exciting part of it. And that's why I want to do this role in lots of ways. So that will take a lot longer to do, because we really have to get to the crux of what is that important bit that we're trying to get to, and what do we want to, you know, what do we want to see at the end of this? What do we want to be as a council, and what do we want to do for our area? So in terms of, I'm just going to go to the member one now, because actually in terms of member input, I welcome that. It's been, the Task and Finish group has been invaluable to the work that I've done, and them leading and giving direction and speaking for residents is hugely important. And one of the reasons why I want the framework and quality assurance to be right is so that I can get really robust reporting to members that is easy to understand, and everything is transparent, so you can see where we're delivering, you can see where we're not. It's right for you to challenge what we're doing. And you're absolutely right. Transformation is a mystery. It sounds like it's a bit like prevention. Can you see it? Can you not? So it's really, really important that we get to that point where you are seeing something tangible on what we're delivering. And I'm absolutely keen to do that. and back to the point that Councillor Pritchard made before, which is about actually, this is £3 million a year. I've got to show that that is delivering way more than £3 million worth of work and value to the council and its residents. So that's important. And then, is it a quick 6-week fix? There will be one or two things where you can dive in, do a quick win and come back out again, but our role is a long-term facilitation role. So we work with members of the service to build and remodel those services in a way that means that we're not just slapping sticky tape on things. We're really thinking about what does the future look like, using those experts to model it, and then coming away and actually facilitating that from start to finish through the milestones to make sure we get to the vision of where we want to be. I think that's answered them all. If not, then tell me.
Thanks very much. All complete.
Wonderful. Thank you. Ken Ritchie, then Councillor Davenport, Julie.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise for missing about a couple of minutes of one of your early slides. My system seemed to suddenly give up on me. I don't think, however, that that is the reason that I still don't feel that I have a proper view of what your transformation team is actually doing or is going to be there for. I welcome what you've said about reporting to members and wanting transparency. I think my first question would be, if that is the case, why have we only been presented with 2 sides of paper that just have a list of vague priorities, but nothing very concrete about what transformation is actually taking place and what it is that we are getting for the 2.1 million at the moment, with a higher budget for next year. I would be interested to know something about this team of 37 people. I don't want to know, we haven't time for you to tell us about every one of the 37 posts, but at least in groups, who they are, what sort of expertise you have got within the team, why 37 and not some other number. Every organisation I can think of from time to time has a major reorganisation, but they don't necessarily bring in transformation teams from the outside. Very often they'll bring in management consultants, and they will at least create a sort of unity, because everybody agrees that the management consultants got it all wrong. I just feel that in this case, you talked about transformation that needs to take place. You mentioned ICT and adult services. Do you have people that know more about ICT than our ICT managers, or are more expert in the delivery of adult social care than the people we've got? It's quite possible that you do. But in most cases, I would have thought that the people who would be taking the lead in that transformation are the people who we have appointed to actually lead these particular departments, these particular services, rather than a separate group that is coming from the outside. I still just have that big question mark over what transformation is actually going to be. Now, I'm sure what you're doing is going to be absolutely great, but you haven't communicated it, I feel, to us, at least certainly not to me, in a way that I can understand, say, yeah, that is going to be 2.9 million that is well spent.
Thank you. Is that it, Ken? Yes?
Yeah.
Right. Over to you, Jane.
Okay, so just to say, Councillor Ritchie, just to be clear, the transformation team is not in place yet. So they are being recruited to currently. So the groupings that you've got within transformation are, they're a project team. So you've got project managers, business analysts, program managers, quality assurance. So they are a facilitation team, and the 37 people is based on the timeline that we've got of programme of work for hosted aggregation and opportunities that have come out of the programme. As I've already said to Councillor Roberts, I think what isn't helping is that you haven't seen that timeline. So I will work on a way that we can get that timeline across to you, which gives you more of the detail of the size of the programme that we've got to do. What I will say is, bear in mind with this unitary programme that over the last year, there should have been transformation and that hasn't happened. We still have huge amounts of work to do to deliver the change that needs to happen. All of the teams are completely separate still. So that involves massive restructure. And you're right, we will be using a number of those experts within the services, but that needs coordinating, because you can't just have odd projects here and there at this kind of scale. Otherwise you'd be treading all over each other and your enabler services would fall over. So for example, you couldn't have HR doing every restructure across the board in one go. You have to time that, you have to project manage it. And it is fairly normal for organisations to have transformation resource. Sometimes they have it within the services, especially of a programme of this size of work. You know, this is one of the biggest unitary changes in the country and we have not finished yet. We have not finished with this by a long shot. So that's the need for transformation. The 2.9 million was always when the transformation budget was set, there was always 4 million a piece for West and North anyway. So the additional 0.9 is the assessment of resource that we need in addition to that. So that money was always there. But obviously we need to prove that those savings, we're also tasked with delivering. When we look at the unitary programme and we've got remaining 35 million to deliver across North and West, we are the team that's tasked with making sure that that happens, as well as future savings to ensure that the budget balances in future years. So we have to deliver our worth. Otherwise, you're right, you're going to question why we're here. But the actual facilitation role is that of project management, designing the whole of the restructure and the way that the new services will work with the teams, with the service teams who don't have that skill set to do that. They have a skill set which understands how they deliver their business as usual and their frontline services, but not necessarily the skill set to actually develop that into a full-scale programme of change, which is what we're talking about this team doing. And when you think about 37 people across the amount of services that we have to do that with over the next 2 to 3 years, it's actually not a large number. So hopefully that answers it. If there's anything else you want me to clarify, I'm more than happy to do that.
It would be quite helpful if you were able to provide something on paper so that we can actually see what it is, what the teams are, you talk about they will be engaged in a number of projects, and what these projects are and what you expect the projects to be able to deliver. Because at the moment, we have got very little to provide a picture of what is actually being done.
Okay.
I think you've acknowledged that, haven't you, Jane? And you're going to provide that timeline and maybe the teams as well. Now, we've got a number of people who want to come in on this. So could you make your questions really quite brief and focused? So Julie Davenport and then Councillor Dermot Banbridge. Thank you. Julie?
Thank you. I've only been in this council since 2017, and I have sat through many actually transformation sessions, and usually it starts with them telling us what they're going to do, which is magic, and then they didn't happen. Now, I'm not judging by the past at all. I'm sure you'll do a fantastic job. That is not what I'm saying, but what I'm trying to say is I am a little cynical now with things. And the other thing is, I don't understand the budgeting for this, because you've got from the 1st of April going back NCC, a lot of the money anyway, most of it, and then going forward, it's the West North Ants. So I was told 20 million for the whole of the transformation. So are you involved in what is going on now, or are we just speaking about what will be happening in the future with transformation team? I don't quite understand that, and the budget, how that's worked out, please.
Okay, so Councillor Davenport, so in terms of your concern and where you're saying you're cynical, that's the reason why I want to provide the robust management information, because one of the key things is that we show that we are actually delivering and not double counting any of the savings or any of the efficiencies or any of the improvements, but that we actually show where the benefits are being realised and the importance of those. So hopefully, unfortunately, I can't go back in time and rewind any of that, but what I can do going forward is provide you with the information to show that it's being delivered and be judged on the merits of what we deliver as the team. Just to say the team, like I say, the team is not in place yet, so that will start from in a couple of months' time when we've got the framework in place, just to manage your expectations with that. With regards to the budget, so there are current transformation programs. I'm not sure which the 20 million is you're referring to, but there is current transformation programs. It might be the business rates pilots you're talking to, which are within the program currently, but they are separate projects all being delivered by the program itself. The new transformation team is a completely separate team starting again from scratch. So there's almost a line, but we will take on those business rate pilots and finish them off. So any of the transformation projects that are still outstanding in the current world will transfer over to the transformation team unless they specifically sit better in business as usual and they're smaller projects. Have I explained that clearly?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, Julie?
Yes, you have explained it to a degree, but I think it's probably me trying to get my numbers head around it all, if you understand, because I've got papers here telling me of what they wanted to save this year, which hasn't happened. Is that part of the ongoing transformation now or NCC now? I'm just a bit confused as to the papers that I've got and what it relates to. I know it also, but there is.
Unfortunately, I can't see the papers. If you want to send me the papers, I'm happy outside of this. I think it's the business rate pilot stuff you've got, but I'm not sure what it is. But feel free to email me and I'm happy to look at whatever information you've got and just help you unpick that and tell you exactly what it is you're referring to and where it sits, if that's helpful.
I think that's a very good suggestion, Julie. Would you mind emailing those really, really specific questions to
Can
Jane
I just
Carr?
say, if you
Julie, would you email those questions to Jane so that we can move on? We've got a lot of questions already in the pipeline, and you're asking something quite specific that I think relates back to previous work done at NCC. Okay. Dermot, and then Dennis Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Jane. Nice to see your enthusiasm hasn't waned in any ways. Coming on to the sort of expectations and that of our workforce, obviously one of the key things that's tied up with what you're doing is where different departments are going to be based and what buildings are being used. And I guess it's a bit of a juggling act to try and work out what those are. But when do you think the staff will get to some idea of where the teams are going to be based in the future, so that it's one of the questions I get asked every time I sort of see people. Do you know when we're going to be working from? I don't know if you can answer that, but please try. Thanks.
Okay. So it's a difficult question. The reason it's difficult is at the moment there is no decisions or any changes to be made apart from very specific teams that know it. And what it will be done is the question will be answered a bit at a time. So as you remodel or look at a service, then you will review where they're based and whether it's the right base for them, etc. So there is not a set timeline for for all the services to know where they're working by a certain time. I mean, the best thing you can do is tell them not to worry at the moment, because there's no immediate changes coming for anybody or where they work. And where you've got things like, for example, if you've got the depots, the likelihood of any depots changing at this point in time for a foreseeable future is very low. So it's more about us working in a better way with the buildings that we've got currently, and also embracing the fact of the home working that has always worked so well currently in the COVID situation, and seeing how we capitalize on that a bit more, and then how we use our buildings more effectively. So where we're not using them necessarily for council meetings anymore, can they be used for community use? What else can we do with them? You know, how do we make them? So that's the focus at the moment. That isn't to say that specific teams won't be looked at, whether they're in the right place or whether there's a better base for them. For example, some of the community bases might be better for some of the social care, so they can get closer to their clients and their service users, but they would embrace that because they want to get closer to their service users. So unfortunately, that's the best answer I can give at the moment, because there is no specific decisions around that at all at the moment.
Just one question leading on from that. Obviously, the different buildings are sort of being questioned for their use. Is there a sort of priority as to looking at buildings at this stage, or are you waiting further in the transformation program to see a bigger picture before you start looking at buildings, etc.?
Yeah, the only thing that's in the transformation timeline early is an early property review, and that would just be about, are we using available space to the best of it, not about moving anybody or doing anything with buildings. It's currently accepted that the buildings are as they are. People are located where they are, so there is no immediate pressure within the transformation timeline to change that.
Okay.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, Dennis, Councillor Meredith, and then Mike Warren, Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I ask my question to Jane, I have to leave at 7:15. As you know, I'm still suffering from long COVID, so I get very tired if I'm you know, trying to concentrate.
We'll excuse you at 7:15. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Jane, I was just wondering about the transformation of Northampton Partnership Homes. Have you had any rapport with that organisation? Because they certainly are doing good work, building lots of new houses and really carrying out what Northampton Borough Council wanted with their housing stock. Could you ask that question for me, please?
Sure. So the relationship with Northamptonshire Partnership Homes at the moment is being built with Jo Barrett, who's the new AD for Housing and Communities. So she's been working very closely with them to understand what they're doing at the moment. Certainly, I will be having meetings with any key partners and organisations going forward where we think that there is transformation or improvement possibilities with them. And one of the things that we need to work out fairly quickly as a transformation team is how we engage external partners to make sure they're kept up to date and involved and engaged. Back to Councillor Roberts' point about things not happening after decisions are made, that help us shape services going forward as well. So we just need to make sure we get that really good engagement, and Northamptonshire Partnership Homes will be part of that, along with the relationship that Jo's already building with them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Warren, Mike Warren, and then Emma again.
Thank you, Chair. Just two quick short questions, actually. How was the principles listed in the report rationalised, and how was the work of the Task and Finish group framed the priorities of the transformation team?
Okay, so in terms of rationalisation, I'm not sure what you mean. Could you elaborate for that a bit for me?
How you prioritised that they were the most important.
Okay, so that was through discussion with members. As we looked at the services and the work to go forward, the members were very, very clear on what they thought the key elements were. And they felt from the information they had from their residents that these were the right principles to have. There was a longer list which was broken down to those as the most important, and it was based on member feedback. So it was rationalised through looking at what was important to the members, what they felt the residents would feel was important, and what potentially had been the mistakes of the past, and making sure that the focus was on that basis. So the customer-centred one was very much came from not putting the organisation ahead of what the customer need was. So there was lots and lots of conversation in that member task and finish group about those principles and why those. Okay. Does that answer? And sorry, there was a second question which I've just lost.
It was the how the work of the task and finish groups frame the priorities of the transformation team.
Okay, so there are some priorities that we have to do, which is, for example, aggregation and hosted to disaggregation services, because those are functional, operational. But in terms of opportunities, which is the other part to this that we have to take out of the Future Northants programme, those principles will form the core of the strategy, the transformation strategy. So when we choose what we're going to be doing going forward and prioritise opportunities, they will be prioritised through that matrix of those principles. And that's why the task and finish group were very clear in the ordering. So if we had to test out a project and say, you know, are we going to do this one above another, we would pick the one that was customer centered, best value, you know, all of those things. So we can use those almost as a matrix to measure and a criteria, so we can align those projects so they will absolutely be the center of that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Right, Emma, and then Ken Pritchard. And I think we have to draw these questions to a close after that.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks again, Jane. It might be the wrong time to ask, given some of the points you've made, but I appreciate we're using the word transformation, but a lot of this is restructure and it's reorganisation of departments and how they run. Have we got any indicator on what the level of staff impact is going to be and what the level of redundancies are likely to be? Have we got any mapping at all on that? And can you give some reassurances that there will be joint consultation committees for each of these transformations, and that scrutiny will be given the opportunity to look at those transformations as well?
Okay, so within the budget, there is a figure for aggregation costs, which is the expected saving, but there is no set staff restructure or redundancy level within that. The whole principle set by the members throughout this has been that we have minimal or no compulsory redundancies. So we are looking at other ways of mitigating that all the way through. And the initial ones that we've done with tier 1 to 3 and with the transformation team have kept that principle throughout the consultation. So we're looking at redeployment opportunities. We offer VR. We have offered VR where appropriate, and we're also looking to mitigate through redeployment into other roles. So I can't give you any numbers because we don't have them, and there is no expectation necessarily on that at the moment, but it is about getting the best out resources, but also ensuring that we keep any redundancies to a minimum.
Okay, thank you. So it's brilliant to hear that we've worked on that basis and we're working on retaining and redeploying staff rather than any compulsory redundancies. But back to the point of, will there be, on each individual transformation and restructure, will there be consultation committees set up to allow there to be real consideration of that in the instances where you feel as transformation you haven't been able to achieve that, and will scrutiny be given the opportunity to look at that again?
Okay, so I can't answer that currently because we haven't had the conversation as a management team or agreed that yet. So what I can do is take that away and then bring it back to an answer for you, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair.
Right. Ken Pritchard and then David Smith, and I think that really has to be the last question.
Thank you, Chair. Probably Councillor Roberts actually has probably half requested my question, but what it is some of these major changes that you will be recommending, what involvement will councillors have with regards to agreeing these major changes? And secondly, something that I was quite surprised at is that I've just with your previous presentation, is that there virtually has been no activity whatsoever with regards to transformation to date. I do appreciate the COVID scenario, but it's quite surprising that no information was coming forward, that no transformation really has taken place so far.
Okay, so I'll take the last question first, if that's okay. So in terms of transformation, just to be clear, no transformation on the current services has taken place in the terms of the Future Northants programme that we were going to do. But what has taken place still is the business rate pilots work, although some of that has been delayed in terms of realisation because of COVID, and also the NCC transformation projects that were happening anyway. So those bits have continued. It's the actual transformation that should have happened within Future Northants around reshaping some of the structures and some of the services early. So that's the bit that hasn't happened. So just to make sure I've been clear
What
on
I'm
that.
saying actually is we've only just been informed that it hasn't happened.
Okay. I'm not sure because I thought that had gone through previous governance. So, and I haven't been here before that point. So unfortunately, I don't know the answer to whether it has or it hasn't.
Yeah.
Sorry, and what was the first part of the question?
The other one was with regards to councillor participation on some of these major changes that you're actually going to propose. Will the councillors have an input into those changes?
Yes is the answer. What I can't tell you is how at the moment, because we haven't worked that through yet. We know there's going to be certainly an officers transformation board, and then I need to work out how do we get the best input from members and the best value. And actually the transformation task and finish group has worked really well. So based on the principles of members being able to input and seeing what the large scale proposals are, you know, we need to get that member input on shaping some of that. So again, it's something I need to take away and think about how we do it in the best way. But there is a commitment to making sure that members are involved in shaping some of this.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay. Thank you. Right, Councillor Smith, David Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So, Jane, is there or could there be a sort of a Acme instant list of projects so we know what sort of headlines you've got for the transformation team? Because I think that would make it much easier for members to understand. We understand the role of the transformation team, but it would be nice to have just a little bit more detail. So you know, if you're doing a build, you've got your timber and you've got your metalwork, your blocks, your bricks, your cement, you know, those things. Because I think it would be, well, certainly for me, I would really start to understand much better. Understand what you're doing, which would be nice. But I kind of understand, of course. But just on those projects, because you know it's going over a long period, and it would be just nice so we can sort of keep up with the progress, so to speak, on each individual thing. Obviously, if it creates a lot of work for you, then don't do it. But it would be nice for me, from my simplistic way of looking at things, just having those headlines of what's being worked on.
Okay, I think if I can bring back the timeline, a future point, and the reason I'm saying this is because we've got massive pressure. I'm also currently responsible for delivering the FN programme, which is due to obviously vest on the 1st of April. So this period for us is really, really busy with the team. If I can come back in kind of towards the end of April, May time with that, is that going to be soon enough? Just because
that'd be brilliant. I think just so we can all understand it. It's you know, and then because particularly when we've got new members. Coming forward in the elections, etc., etc. I think it would be get us all up to speed really quickly, and you get a lot less crazy questions from me, I'm sure.
Okay, that's helpful.
Okay, I think that's the end of councillors' questions, Jane. I've a bit of grilling there, but I think what's emerged is a real, a really sort of deep need to see the timeline, and just following on from David's questions there, what it is on that timeline, and information for councillors and for staff, because I think transformation is a very unsettling time for many people. The councillors feel insecure because obviously we have residents to answer to, and I'm sure the staff have also their concerns about their future, not only of their employment, but of the roles that they're expected to play. And I think update on progress is going to be really important going forward. So if as a committee we could ask you to bear those in mind and come back to whatever form this committee takes in the future after May, I think that would be a really useful thing. And clearly there's a lot of things that people are very interested in, and the progress updates would be this is going to shape the future of the unitary in many ways in the delivery of our services and the sort of responses to services that our residents are going to have. So, you've got a very important role to fulfil and to communicate and to just reassure everybody, councillors and staff, I feel. So I don't think there's any more questions, and I'd like to thank you very much on behalf of everybody for for your input tonight and for the information that you've given to us. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
We are continuing the meeting, but I suspect you've probably got other things to do, and we're very happy to say good night if you wish to leave at this point.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Right. Okay. Right. The next item on the agenda is the annual report, and you have it there in your pack. This is a summary that has been put together by Tracy and all the other officers that have been involved in our work since July. We started in July with a session with SIPFA, who came along and worked with us on a training session, and I think we've worked for 10 months on the work, the overview and scrutiny work that we've been involved with here. So I hope you've had a chance to read this report. It is a summary, and I think if you read it alongside the minutes of our meetings and the budget report, to which there's a link in this report. There's a link to the budget report, which I think has been one of the major pieces of work that we've done. It does give a flavour of the breadth of work that we've been involved with, and there is obviously in the minutes and the reports and recommendations, the notes that we've made, there's much greater detail on each of these subjects. So I'll open it up to any questions, any queries, any suggestions, any comments. Emma Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I said one very brief comment. I touched upon it a moment ago in respect of pre-decision scrutiny. We've said from the very beginning that that's what we should be all about, and that should be a key element of us. I just didn't feel that translated into the report, probably because we haven't had or been given that much opportunity to pre-decide or look at any pre-decisions. But I think it needs to feature in there that that's been a key goal of, if everybody agrees that it's still a key goal of ours, obviously, as being a key goal, and we would like it to be a key goal for any continuing overview and scrutiny committee.
Yes, I think that's been a problem of working as a shadow, working with suggestions. I mean, what we have looked at has only been recommendations, because the council, when it is elected, when it's vested, the 1st of April, they're the body that will be making these decisions. And we have really been working towards setting in process some of the thinking behind it. So I think Andrew will probably explain that slightly better than I've done in a moment. Let's have some more comments, and then maybe bring Andrew in to put the work that we've done into the context of the whole development of the governance and structures for the new unitary authority. Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I think the report's very balanced and certainly sums up the work that we've all been involved with over the last 12 months. And quite clearly, an effective scrutiny is one that gets involved with those nitty-gritty questions and those issues that are really bubbling about there, sometimes beneath the surface, sometimes very overtly, but need to be addressed. And therefore, we've asked the right questions, I think, and certainly delved as deep as is possible to do in the time that we've had. Just I suppose, an aside to that, in terms of we're doing this in the public interest, clearly, as representatives of the public. Have you had any feedback from members of the public at all in terms of any of the work that we've carried out? Clearly, it's difficult for them to be part of the meeting other than through the YouTube link, and I appreciate the restrictions or the constraints that have been in place over the last year. But have you, out of interest, had any direct response in terms of any of the work that we've been involved with? It would be useful just to I suppose, put that in if that was possible.
No, I mean, I haven't had any direct comments or queries from residents. I think the YouTube varies between about 20 and 47 views. It's not obviously something that many of our residents are rushing to do, but it is there forever if people wish to come back to it as a record of what has been discussed at this stage of the development and the sort of evolution, if you like, of the new council. I think this is part of that evolution. I think it is a stage in that evolution. It's certainly not offering the final judgments. It's not, perhaps having some of the teeth that you would perhaps like, but I think, I'd hope very much that it set the pattern for that to happen as we move to the new unitary authority and the scrutiny groups, the scrutiny committees that will function within the new unitary. But I would welcome engagement. I'd welcome people coming and joining the meeting. It's been, I think it's been a difficult time with Zoom, and I think it's been a difficult time with what everybody else has been coping with in their lives, quite frankly. It's a big question mark for many of our residents, but the availability is there. Jamie Lane.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think once we've passed the milestone of May and we promote ourselves in a proper fashion through websites and press releases, on Overview and Scrutiny Northampton, we used to get about 50 or 60 inquiries a year on our working programme. So I think, if we promote ourselves in the right way, we will get the public engaged. But on the report is what I'm speaking on. A very good report. It tells people what we get up to on scrutiny. I know it's quite a small number in comparison with the council. It's just, how do we communicate this report to the rest of the council? That's my question.
I think that is possibly a question for Andrew or maybe George. How does this report go forward to the rest of the council? And I do agree with you, Jamie, that when the public are involved in the topics that scrutiny will be looking at, I think the interest will be far nearer home, and people will come forward in many different ways to engage with scrutiny as it's formed in the future.
Because the amount of inquiries we used to get, which weren't borough, and we had to back them back to the county, was unbelievable. So it would be great if we did engage.
Yeah, and of course both county and borough services will be combined in the new unitary, so it'll be one point of contact, hopefully. Andrew, do you want to come in here as the future of this report?
Chair, I think this report is a public report anyway, and it is something which you would take forward into the new unitary. But I would make the point that I used the word unique right at the beginning of the meeting, and I think I would use it again here now. This shadow authority has been about preparing for unitary, and it's been about the transition of 4 councils into the unitary, and that's it. If you take after June, you're going to have 3 overview and scrutiny committees, corporate, place, and people, who will be scrutinising and working with the council who is providing services, has got huge budgets in place. The transformation you've just talked about now, the concerns of the communities and that community engagement, it is going to be completely different than the task you've had now. The task you've had now has been very much about scrutinising and helping the authority to prepare for unitary, and that's why you've looked at things such as the budget and the constitution, the ICT website, all of those things. It's all been about preparing for the future. So in essence, on the 31st of March, I think the work of this committee is done, and then it takes on a whole new role and a lot wider role from after the elections. So you have this report here, which I think sets out extremely well just how much input you've actually had and the difference you've made to things such as the budget and the constitution. And if there are any lessons to be taken forward or any areas of work to be taken forward, then it can be. You haven't got the mechanism that you would normally have, in that you would normally do an end of year report for your sovereign council, knowing that sovereign council is going to be there after the 1st of April to take it on board. So I think you're in a little bit of a unique position here. But you have got a public report here, and if there are any things which need to be taken forward, then that can be done when you actually enter into the unitary.
Right. There's a couple of questions here, Emma and Ken, and then George, maybe you could give us your view on where this report goes and where this work goes. So Emma, did you want to come in here? You've had your hand.
Please. Yes, thank you. All the more important, listening to what Andrew's just said, was my original point about including within here the way that we look forward. It might not be accepted, but the way that we have looked at this is that looking forward, those committees, those scrutiny panels need to be looking on a pre-decision basis. Tracy will know I love her reports, but I also like to go on about pre-decision scrutiny, but I think it's integral to how a council should work. If you can't look at something before it started, you don't have the opportunity to shape it. And we agreed in our first meeting that that was one of our essential items. And if it is, then it has to be included somewhere within that report, even if we have to personally shove that under the noses of anybody that will listen later on.
Mm-hmm. I think that is one of the principles of good scrutiny. And I think it's something that we all agreed with at the beginning. It's been quite difficult, I think, to fulfill that role, but it's something that I hope is embedded in our suggestions and recommendations for scrutiny as we move forward.
Chair, I'm not, sorry if I may, Chair, I'm not criticising this group for not being able to do that. I'm saying that we felt it was needed to be done. So therefore, within our end of year or end of time report, it should say that we felt that that was an integral piece of information.
Okay.
That's just.
Would you like that included in the report? Is that a general feeling that that principle needs to be established within the report?
That was my feeling. I don't, yes. Obviously I can't speak for everybody else.
I'm just looking round to see if anybody's shaking a head or nodding.
I'd agree.
Right, okay. I think that perhaps needs strengthening within the report. Absolutely. I think we can add that, can we, Tracy? Thank you. Thank you. Ken Ritchie, and then I think we'd like to go over to George.
Thanks, Chair. Tell me to stop if somebody has already said this, but I get frequent messages saying that the host has cut me out from the meeting. I'm quite sure that it's not the host that's been doing it, but thanks to them for letting me back in each occasion. I just feel, look, I can't imagine that there are a lot of people, either as councillors and certainly not beyond being councillors, who are going to have a great interest in reading this report. But I think that the thing that we need to think about ourselves, and that the new scrutiny committees will need to think about at the end of each year, if they didn't exist, if we didn't exist, or if the new scrutiny committees were not formed, are there things that would actually happen differently? And I feel that we need to actually think through, as any other organization would do, are we actually achieving things? Of course, we have an influence, and as with any form, effectively, of lobbying, you can never be actually certain why decisions were taken one way or another. But I feel that we need to be able to point to things and say that yes, we helped achieve that, and that I think is going to be one of the things that any future scrutiny committees are going to need to think about.
Yes, I do absolutely agree. Yeah. Ken Pritchard, and then we must go to George because time, we are running out of time and people are very, very busy. I know George is.
Very quickly indeed. It's something which obviously Councillor Roberts has brought up and also Councillor Ritchie. It's with regards to having information, prior to actually decisions are taken. Could we just remind that, from a confidentiality point of view, there is the opportunity to put things onto pink papers. So, and I think that's something which, in SNC, that's what we've always done is actually had pink papers prior to any sensitive discussions.
Yes, absolutely. And I do think that being given the ability to attend the governance and the finance task and finish group meetings was an important element in our understanding of both those processes. And just being in the room when the discussions were taken gave the councillors that attended those meetings a real insight. And I do thank them for doing that and for feeding back their thoughts and their conclusions to us. So, right, George, can we bring you in here because you've been with us throughout this and you've been guiding us in many ways and keeping us on the right track, focused on day one. So perhaps, as we sort of come to the end of this committee, you have some comments to make.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. Well, I think, first of all, members should feel very pleased and proud in the work that you have covered over these last 9-10 months or so. If you think back to, I think when we first got together back in June, I think it was, when we started to work through what a potential work programme could look like, agreed that we would meet every other month, soon realised that there was far more work to scrutinise, so ended up meeting fairly regularly. I think it was monthly for a period of time. But I do think that all of the key areas have been covered in terms of the remit for this scrutiny. When you go look at the original terms of reference of what this shadow overview and scrutiny committee were tasked to do, as Andrew has quite rightly pointed out. So I think that's the first thing I'd like to say. In terms of the actual report itself, notwithstanding the suggested updates from Councillor Roberts, what I would suggest to build on what Andrew's already said is perhaps you writing to the leader, Councillor Ian McCord, with the report, asking how best that it will be taken forward as in your role as chair, going forward into the new West Northants Council. Clearly there is a constitution, as Andrew said, that will be voted on next week, debated and then agreed or otherwise next week. And similarly, the 3 scrutiny committees that have been established. So I think the importance of scrutiny has been demonstrated through this group by having 3 scrutiny committees in the new West Northants Council as well. But that would be my suggestion, Chair, for you to consider alongside committee members in how best to take the report forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I do think the formation of those 3 scrutiny committees came out of the analysis and the discussion around best practice in the sovereign councils and the way that the scrutiny has worked well, and the way that avoiding some of the pitfalls that scrutiny has fallen into in the past, which in a sense has precipitated our the formation of this group, the formation of the local government reorganisation. So scrutiny had a part to play in that, and it wasn't a good part, and we want to make sure that it is not repeated, that way of working isn't carried forward. And I think we've probably assured that. Well, it's down to everybody who is going forward to the new unitary to make sure that is not, that bad practice is not taken forward. Anyway, I think if we've got no more comments, I'd like to thank you all very much indeed for your contributions, for your diligence, for all the the positive and constructive comments and suggestions and questions that have come forward. And I hope that you feel that we have achieved something. I think George's suggestion is a good one. And if you are in agreement on your behalf, I will send the report to the leader with the added comments. And I think, as George says, Andrew says, our job is done. So thank you, and wish you all luck in the next few months, and hope that things will will work out very well as we move forward. I think we understand what's going to happen very much better. Andre, you've got a comment.
May I just add a piece, I think, to our meeting today particularly, but I'd like to thank you for having chaired this scrutiny. I think she's really been very effective and I think very balanced from the very start. And I think, as George indicated, we did meet quite a lot to start with initially to try and understand exactly what our remit was and really get bed down those particular positions. I think it has been a very challenging time, definitely with all the change, the uncertainties for everyone, including the staff, which I think you've always drawn out, which I think is very important, and obviously the members of the public too. So I'd like to thank you for that. And can I also thank the members of Democratic Services from whichever councils they've been supporting us with, who have done an admirable job. And I have to say, I have really received everything always. And I'm really, very pleased, because in the uncertain times that we've had, it's been difficult to get into the office and pick up different elements there. But I'm really pleased that they've done a super job in supporting us, and I'd like to reach out to them and thank them for all the work that they've put in to support us. Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman.
Yes, absolutely. I think the minutes I've received from these meetings and all the notices have been absolutely, exemplary. So thank you very much indeed, Tracy, Ed, and Alex.
Absolutely.
And also thank you, Andrew, for your guidance and your wise words. And George, again, thank you very much for all the help and support that you've given this group. So, right, that's it. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening, and good luck in the elections. And I hope you're all back again, scrutinising like crazy in the new unitary.
You too, Jane.
Good evening, everyone. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.